know that sharp curve on Route 66, right outside Barstow? Yeah, that curve, the one that every local warns you about. It's been the subject of whispered stories for years. No one really knows who lived in that old house just off the bend, but everyone agrees on one thing: you don't go there after dark. Not unless you want to disappear like the family from '85. That house, it's still standing, barely, but no one's bothered to tear it down. Why? Maybe because they know it won't stay down for long. I'd heard the stories growing up. Every Halloween, someone dared someone else to go touch the front door and come back. But no one ever did. Not since those kids vanished last year, trying to film a TikTok or something. It was all fun and games until their camera was found on the porch a week later. The footage? Yeah, I watched it. Big mistake. It was shaky at first, typical teenager stuff, laughing, swearing, acting tough. But as they got closer to the house, the mood shifted. The laughter died, replaced by a tense silence. One of them, Mark, I think, pointed out the window. Did you see that? The camera zoomed in, but there was nothing there. Just darkness. Except, you could swear there was a flicker of movement. Like something, or someone, was inside, watching them. They didn't get past the front door. As soon as one of them reached for the knob, the screen cut to static. What came next was worse than the silence. A single frame, just for a split second, showed the house again, only this time, it was different. The windows weren't shattered, the vines weren't crawling up the walls. It looked alive. And then the laughter, low, guttural, like it was coming from deep within the house. And that's when they were gone. The cops chalked it up to a runaway case, but we all knew better. I mean, you don't just vanish like that. Last week, though, things got weirder. Mark's phone, it was found at the bottom of that same curve. No big deal, right? Except when they powered it on, the GPS was active. And guess where the location pinged? Inside the house. I wasn't going to say anything, but I walked by there last night. Couldn't help myself. The house, it's still there, like it's waiting for something. And just as I passed the front gate, I heard it, a laugh. Not the funny kind. The kind that makes your skin crawl. It came from the direction of the front porch, just as a light flickered on inside, like someone was home. I didn't stick around to find out who. But here's the thing, when I got back to my car, my phone buzzed. An AirDrop notification. No name, just a file. I clicked on it. It was a picture of me, standing outside the house. I never took that picture. This is how it starts, the feeling of being watched, the sense that something old is playing a game with you. And now, you're part of it too. Be careful next time you drive by that curve, because once the house knows you, it never forgets. You ever hear about that old railway line that runs behind the house on Route 66? Yeah, the one that's been abandoned for decades. They shut it down after the accident in '72, when that last train derailed just outside Barstow. But some people say the train never really stopped running. Especially around 3 in the morning, the exact time the accident happened. I wasn't a believer until my buddy Chris told me he heard the train one night. He was out camping by the tracks, trying to capture the night sky with his new camera. It was all quiet until, out of nowhere, he heard the distant rumble of wheels on steel. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but the sound kept getting louder. The faint whistle echoed through the air, cutting through the night like a knife. He grabbed his camera, ready to record, but what he captured was something else entirely. The footage was grainy, but you could make out the old train, steam puffing from the engine, moving slowly down the tracks. Except, there was no track left. Just weeds and dirt. And then the voices, desperate, pleading, calling out for help. The camera shook as Chris ran toward the sound, but as soon as he reached the tracks, the train disappeared, like it was never there. But the voices, they stayed. The next morning, they found Chris's camera on the tracks. It was the only thing they found. No sign of Chris, no footprints, nothing. But the camera was still rolling when they picked it up. And on that last clip, a woman's voice, barely audible, whispering, "You shouldn't have come." It's been a year since Chris disappeared, and the strangest thing happened last night. I was walking past those tracks, don't ask why, I don't even know, and I heard it. That whistle, faint but clear. I stood frozen, waiting for the train to pass, but all I saw were the weeds swaying in the breeze. Then I looked down. Lying by my feet was Chris's old hat, the one he was wearing the night he vanished. I never went back after that. And if you hear a train at 3 a.m., my advice? Keep walking. Don't stop. Because once you hear the voices, they won't let you leave. The echoes of the past still ride those abandoned tracks, and if you're unlucky enough to hear the whistle, it might already be too late. It was just a week after Chris vanished when something even stranger happened. My friend, Jamie, was driving late at night on the old highway that runs parallel to the abandoned tracks, close to the house on the curve. It was around midnight, and the road was deserted. That's when he saw her. A woman in white, standing by the side of the road, her face turned away. Jamie slowed down, thinking maybe she needed help. But as he got closer, he noticed something was off. Her dress was old-fashioned, like from the 1950s or something, and it was soaked, though it hadn't rained in days. He pulled over and rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" he called out, but she didn't answer. Slowly, she turned to face him, and Jamie said it felt like the temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, like she wasn't really seeing him. And then, without a word, she got into the back seat of his car. Jamie tried to make small talk, but she stayed silent, staring out the window. His rearview mirror showed nothing but her blank expression. As they drove further down the road, he felt the air grow heavier, colder. When they finally reached the outskirts of town, he turned to ask where to drop her off. The back seat was empty. He slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. No way. He had just seen her, just felt the cold air from her presence. But she was gone, vanished into thin air. Shaken, he turned back around and drove home. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Jamie found something that made his blood run cold. On the seat where she had been sitting, there was a patch of water. But more than that, it was a small, crumpled photograph. He picked it up, his hands shaking. It was old, faded, showing a woman in a white dress, the same woman he had just given a ride to. On the back of the photo was written, in shaky handwriting, "The last passenger." He later found out that she was a victim of the 1972 train derailment, found dead not far from where Jamie had picked her up. Sometimes, what you see on the side of the road isn't a cry for help, it's an invitation to join them. After the encounter with the woman on the road, things started feeling off. Weird coincidences, cold drafts where there shouldn't be any, that sort of thing. It was a few nights later when I had another brush with the unknown, and this time it hit much closer to home. It was late, past midnight, and I was starving. I couldn't sleep, so I ordered some food from this 24-hour diner that's always open. Nothing fancy, just a burger and fries. The delivery estimate was around 30 minutes, so I settled in, mindlessly scrolling on my phone to pass the time. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. It was strange, the app hadn't notified me that the order was on its way, but maybe it was just a glitch. I opened the door, and there stood a delivery guy, wearing a hoodie with the logo of the diner. He was holding my order. But something was off about him. He didn't say a word, not even the usual "here's your order" or "enjoy your meal." He just handed me the bag and turned to leave. I didn't even get a good look at his face. I called out to thank him, but he didn't turn around, didn't even acknowledge me. Weird, right? When I opened the bag, everything seemed fine, the food was there, still warm. But something was gnawing at me. I checked the receipt stapled to the bag, and that's when I noticed it, the timestamp. It said the order had been placed, yesterday. At 12:30 a.m. The exact same time I was holding the bag in my hand. My stomach dropped. I immediately grabbed my phone to check the diner's app, and there it was, my order, still pending, with no delivery assigned to it yet. I called the diner, trying to figure out what was going on. After a few rings, someone picked up. I explained the situation, and there was a long pause. Finally, the guy on the other end of the line said, "We don't do midnight deliveries anymore. Haven't in over a year." I hung up, my mind racing. I went to the building's security camera footage the next day, hoping to get some clarity. What I saw only made things worse. The footage showed me opening the door, but there was no delivery guy. Just the bag, sitting on the ground as if it had been placed there by some invisible hand. They say some things happen outside the boundaries of time, and maybe, just maybe, that delivery wasn't meant for me. Or worse, it was. A couple of days after the strange delivery, I was trying to shake off the creeping feeling that something was wrong. But it wasn't that easy. Especially not when the weather took a turn for the worse. There was a storm rolling in, one of those heavy, relentless rains that rattles the windows and makes the whole world feel like it's closing in. I had a bad feeling that night, like something was coming. It was around 2 a.m. when I heard the first knock. Just a faint tap on the window. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the knock came again, louder this time. My window's on the second floor, so there was no way anyone could be knocking from outside. I tried to ignore it, but the knocks grew more insistent. It wasn't the wind. It was deliberate. Someone, or something, was trying to get my attention. I hesitated, then walked over to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. No one was there. Just the rain pouring down in thick sheets, drenching everything. I stood there for a moment, wondering if I was losing my mind, when the knock came again, this time, right behind me. I froze. The knock was coming from inside the window. I whipped around, heart pounding, and that's when I saw it, a faint reflection in the glass. A figure, standing in the room behind me. But when I turned around, the room was empty. Completely empty. The knocks kept coming, slow and steady. They followed me through the house, tapping on every window I passed. The storm outside raged, but it was nothing compared to the cold, heavy dread settling in my chest. Then came the whisper. It was so soft, almost lost in the sound of the rain, but I heard it clear as day, "Let me in." I didn't stick around to find out what would happen if I answered. I ran out the front door, into the rain, and didn't stop until I was halfway down the block. When I finally worked up the nerve to go back the next morning, everything was quiet. No knocks, no whispers. But the window? There were handprints on the inside, smeared down the glass, like something, or someone, had been trying to claw its way out. Sometimes, the things that knock aren't looking for a way in. They're looking for a way out. After the knocks, I wasn't feeling right. Sleep became impossible, and it wasn't long before the stress took its toll. My body was shutting down. After a few sleepless nights, I ended up in the hospital for observation. They said it was exhaustion, but I knew better. There was something else lurking in the shadows, something watching, waiting for me to let my guard down. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke up in the hospital. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the monitor beeping steadily beside me. The hospital was quiet, too quiet for comfort. I felt uneasy, like I wasn't alone. And then I saw him. Standing at the foot of my bed was the same delivery man from that night, still holding a food bag, staring at me with eyes that didn't blink. He didn't say a word, didn't move, just stood there, like he had all the time in the world. My heart pounded, but my body was frozen, paralyzed with fear. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but no sound came out. I blinked, and he was gone. Vanished, just like that. But the eerie feeling remained. I frantically reached for the call button to summon a nurse, but when she came in, she looked at me like I was crazy. "There's no one here," she said. "You must have been dreaming." But I knew what I saw. When I asked her to check the security footage, she hesitated, then reluctantly agreed. A few hours later, she came back, pale and shaken. She didn't say anything, just handed me a tablet with the footage. On the screen, you could see me lying in bed, fast asleep. And then, there he was, the delivery man, standing at the foot of my bed, watching me. But here's the thing, the footage showed him standing there for nearly an hour, without moving, just watching. At one point, he reached into the bag he was holding and pulled something out, but the screen cut to static before I could see what it was. When the footage came back, he was gone. Some visitors don't come to help, they come to watch. And when they bring something with them, you might not want to know what it is. After the hospital, I thought I could finally catch a break. I was wrong. That same night, after being discharged, I was lying in bed, trying to get some rest. My phone was on the nightstand next to me, and I swear I hadn't touched it in hours. But when I glanced over, the screen was on camera mode, like someone was using it. At first, I thought it was just a glitch. Phones do that sometimes, right? But when I unlocked the screen, my blood ran cold. There was a new photo in my gallery. One I hadn't taken. It was a picture of me. Not a selfie, though. This was different. It was taken from a distance, like someone had been watching me from across the room. In the photo, I was lying in bed, eyes closed, completely unaware. My heart raced as I checked the time the photo was taken, 3:15 a.m. The exact time I'd woken up earlier that night to the sound of knocking at my door. I scrolled through my phone, looking for answers, and found something even more disturbing. There were more photos, dozens of them. All taken from strange angles around my house. Some were taken from the hallway, others from the living room, but none of them had been taken by me. It was like someone had been inside, documenting my every move. Then I saw the last one. It was a picture of the window by my bed. But this time, there was a reflection in the glass. A face, barely visible, but unmistakably there, staring back at me from the darkness outside. I dropped my phone, heart pounding. That face, it was the same as the delivery man from the hospital. Sometimes, it's not just the people watching you that you need to fear. Sometimes, it's the moments they capture that tell you just how close they've been. After the photo incident, I started becoming paranoid. I could feel eyes on me wherever I went, even when I was alone. It didn't help that strange things kept happening. The last straw came when I found a note. Not just any note, it was in my own jacket pocket, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. I had no idea how it got there. The note was short, cryptic. It simply said, "You saw what you shouldn't have. Don't come back." My mind immediately went back to that night at the house on the curve and everything that followed. The delivery man, the train, the knocking, all of it. I knew I was getting too close to something I wasn't meant to understand. The most unsettling part? The handwriting on the note looked familiar. It was almost identical to the scrawl on the back of that old photograph Jamie found of the woman by the tracks. The one who was killed in the train accident. I felt a cold sweat break out as I reread the note over and over, trying to make sense of it. Was it a warning? A threat? Or something worse, an invitation? I retraced my steps, thinking about where the note could have come from. I hadn't been anywhere out of the ordinary, just my usual routes. That's when it hit me, the note hadn't appeared after a trip out. It had shown up after I was in my own home. Someone had been in my house. Someone had been close enough to slip the note into my pocket, without me even noticing. My chest tightened, panic setting in. Whoever, or whatever, it was, they were already inside. Some warnings come too late. But by the time you realize it, the danger is already much closer than you think. Things took a turn for the worse after I found that note. I started double-checking all the locks in my house, paranoid that someone, or something, was going to come for me. Every night, I made sure the windows were locked, the doors bolted. But it wasn't enough. Last night, after hours of tossing and turning, I finally fell into an uneasy sleep. I don't know what woke me up, maybe a creak in the floorboards, maybe the wind outside, but something wasn't right. I rolled over to check the time, and that's when I heard it, the soft click of the front door opening. My heart stopped. I'd locked it. I was sure of it. But there it was, the faintest sound of the door creaking open, followed by the soft shuffle of footsteps. I lay there, frozen in place, listening as the footsteps grew closer. Slowly, I slid out of bed, careful not to make a sound. When I reached the hallway, I saw it. My front door was open, just a crack, with my house key lying on the floor, on the inside of the door. Someone had unlocked it from the outside, but there was no one there. I closed the door and locked it again, hands trembling. I checked the key I had with me. It was identical to the one on the floor. How could that be? How could my key be both with me and used to unlock the door? The worst part? When I bent down to pick it up, I saw something outside, in the darkness. A figure, standing in the shadows just beyond the porch. Watching. Sometimes, the things that enter your home don't need permission. They already have the key. It was yesterday morning when I decided I couldn't take it anymore. Every shadow, every creak, every misplaced object had me on edge. I needed answers. The key in the door, the strange figure outside, the notes, the photographs, it all pointed back to one place, the train tracks. The ones just beyond the house on the curve. The same tracks where Chris disappeared. The same tracks where Jamie saw the woman. I had avoided them for so long, but something inside me knew that if I wanted to stop this, I had to go back. It was almost as if the place was calling me. It was late afternoon when I finally got there. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the tracks, and the air was heavy with that familiar, eerie stillness. I walked along the rusty rails, my footsteps echoing in the quiet. Then I saw it, a faint glimmer of something lying on the tracks. It was Chris's hat, the one he had been wearing the night he disappeared. I bent down to pick it up, my hands shaking. As soon as my fingers touched the brim, I heard it, the sound of a train whistle, distant but growing louder. My blood turned to ice. The tracks had been abandoned for years, no train had passed through in decades. But as I stood there, frozen in place, the sound grew deafening, the ground beneath me shaking. I looked up. There, in the distance, the train was coming. A massive, ghostly engine, billowing black smoke as it thundered toward me. And on the tracks in front of it, the silhouettes of people, figures standing, watching, waiting. I could see their faces now, pale and lifeless, just like the woman Jamie had seen. And among them, Chris. The whistle screamed, and I ran. I sprinted off the tracks, but the sound followed me, growing louder, closer, until it was all I could hear. When I finally stopped to catch my breath, the sound was gone. I turned back to look at the tracks. They were empty. I left Chris's hat there, on the rails. Whatever was haunting those tracks, it wasn't done with me. And now, every night at 3 a.m., I hear that whistle again. Closer. Louder. Like the train is still coming for me. Some things never stop, even when they're long gone. And when they finally catch up to you, there's nowhere left to run. Before you go, make sure you've locked all your doors. You never know who or what might be watching. If you dare, hit that subscribe button and join us for more tales that'll haunt your nights. But be warned, once you're in, there's no turning back. The shadows are always closer than you think. See you in the next nightmare.